Ever since I started regularly making videos for this channel, I've been mocking members of the legacy media for making the absurd claim that Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, was unpopular or somehow hurting the brand appeal of the Conservative Party with moderate Canadians. This went on for several months after Poilievre became the Conservative Party leader, which was a weird sleight of hand trick whereby they were technically correct that Pierre Poilievre wasn't very popular by polling both personally and for the Conservative Party of Canada for the first few months of his leadership. But that's because every single opposition leader makes it look like their party picked wrong when they made them leader. Because in the first few months of their leadership, nobody knows who they are, and they are not able to have a positive effect on the party's popularity unless like a massive celebrity becomes the party leader, like Justin Trudeau was back in 2013, because he had high name recognition because of his father. With Pierre Poilievre, after about 8 or so months, he actually started clicking with people. People started recognizing his name, and name recognition matters a lot. People like people that they recognize. Nobody likes a party leader that they do not know from Adam. Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole had this problem where by election day, I'd be shocked if 70% of people who cast ballots could even name them as the Conservatives party leader. Pierre Poilievre has shot up in popularity not only because he has high name recognition these days, but he actually talks about the issues that people want to hear about. But this is just to say that for a while he wasn't very popular and he slowly gained popularity over time. And during that popularity gain, I was usually pretty cautious at not wanting to declare a spike in Conservative Party appeal until I saw multiple polling companies picking up on the rise in popularity. So when there was just a couple of pollsters like Main Street and Abacus showing the Conservative Party punching above like 36 and 37%, going above 10% over the Liberals, I usually wanted to wait until I saw Nanos, Ledger, Think HQ, and some of the other ones also mirror their takes. Just so, because obviously, if you aggregate all these polls together, they were usually still only around 6% above the Liberals, because pollsters like Ledger were only showing the Conservatives up like 1 or 2 points, and sometimes even the Liberals up a point. But these days, I think I've almost sort of gone in the opposite direction, where now that the Conservatives are decisively ahead by 14, 15, and even sometimes 18 points above the Liberals, I actually think that the Conservatives are being underpolled right now. And I think it's because the Conservatives have hit the ceiling of how high they will ever kind of go in public popularity polls unless something dramatic happens. Like if Poilievre saves a puppy on television, he can hit 52% if he wants. I don't see the Conservative Party going past 45% in any poll before the next election. And I think it is because of the concept of revealed preference versus stated preference. I think in Canada, because of the bias in the legacy media and just the culture in general, towards more center-left parties to prove you're not a dirty American who likes conservative right-wing politics. A lot of Canadians, I think, whenever you poll them, are not going to admit that they're Conservative Party supporters. And don't get me wrong, we're having polls where the Conservative Party's at 42%, 38%, 41% in the polls. That's quite a hefty chunk of the electorate, and it's easily the biggest chunk of the polling right now. The NDP is usually around 19-20%. The Liberals are anywhere from 22 to like 26%. They're obviously, the Conservatives are doing very well. At the same time, I think the Conservatives, rather than being at about 41 or 42% like many of the polls are showing, I think in reality they're probably more at like 45 or 46. And I just want to quickly cover what revealed versus stated preference is, just so you know what I'm talking about, before I sort of go on to why I think a lot of these polls are missing the lead the Conservative Party probably has, and maybe they need to correct the way that they're collecting their data. But what revealed and stated preference is stated preference is what you say to a pollster when you're asked what you think about something, and your revealed preference is what you actually do when it comes down to making a decision in real life that's going to actually affect you. So one concept I heard recently, it was actually just yesterday, it was really interesting, was when you survey customers at grocery stores at what type of coffee they like, everyone, when you give them tons of different descriptions of options to choose from, they will mostly choose or disproportionately choose bold, strong coffee. The problem is most people don't actually like bold, strong coffee. Much like myself, most people buy mild or medium blends at the store, and most people don't really like those more what I would derogatorily describe as strong, inky, acrid coffee blends. And the same thing goes with many other different types of products, and including polling when it comes to elections. I think what's happening with the Conservatives is because, like I said before, most people try and signal socially more to the left so that they seem more sort of like, progressive and trendy and not some sort of dark, demure social conservative or something like that. They will sort of disproportionately say they're voting NDP, Liberal, Green, or they'll just abstain. So I think by the 2025 election, we're going to see the Conservative Party do way better than the current polling shows. And I want to quickly just highlight a couple of results in some recent polls that don't really make sense if the Conservatives are truly ahead as much as they are. So I think they're actually being held back in some of these polls by province. So oddly enough, I'm going to start with my own province of Alberta. You think that this wouldn't be a province where the Conservative Party has any problem polling really well, and obviously they're way ahead. They get 60% of the polls in Alberta. But look at this result that they have in Alberta on Nanos's new poll, which overall I believe shows that the Conservatives are at 40% and the Conservative Liberals are at 26. Sorry about this. So look at this. So the Conservatives are at 60%, the Liberals are at 15, and Jagmeet Singh's NDP's at 20, and Maxime Bernier's PPC are at 4. Now that seems like it would be the type of gain that would be created under Pierre Poilievre, but that pretty much is all the results that's pretty much the results in Alberta in the last election. Just look right here. The Liberals got 15.5%, the Conservatives got 55.3%, and the NDP got 19.1%, with Maxime Bernier's PPC getting 7.4%. What we see here is basically every single gain that the Conservative Party has gotten has only been at the expense of the PPC. And maybe it's because NDP and Liberal voters are so much more hardcore for their parties that are in the province of Alberta than people in other provinces are for the NDP and the Liberals. But I don't really think so. I think there's just some people who are in Alberta who don't quite want to say that they vote Conservative simply because of media propaganda around, parental rights are dangerous, and don't you know that Pierre Poilievre is an ultra mega conservative who's secretly an American, or whatever the media is now saying about him. But this trend holds up in other provinces. So in Ontario, this current Nanos poll shows that Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives are at 41%. That's a pretty good lead. And you have 28% for the Liberals and 22% for the NDP. Now, this is actually seems like a major departure for the Liberals when it comes to Ontario, or it is a bit of a departure for the Liberals. So the Liberals in 2021 had 39% of the vote. The Conservatives had 34%, and the NDP had 17%, with Maxime Bernier's PPC getting 5.5% and the Greens getting 2.2%. Now, the difference here, and what I sort of find take an issue with, is this means that the Conservatives, with the massive polling gains they've gotten, literally over 10% sometimes, or 9% increases overall in the country, that means they only benefited 5% in Ontario, which seems a bit odd since the provincial left-wing party scene is fairly weak right now when it comes to the Liberals and the NDP. So it's not like they're getting boosted by any local politicians. And the PCs under Doug Ford are still hyper popular in the province. So you think that the Conservatives would be able to get just more than 5% more than Aaron O'Toole is able to achieve in 2021. In my mind, that doesn't quite line up very well. And I just want to grab this one poll of age preferences for voting from this Abacus data poll that just came out, that I also think is a bit odd when you consider sort of the implications of where people are putting their votes in these polls when reacting to the news. So everyone knows that Justin Trudeau's policies have failed. They also know that Jagmeet Singh is completely useless. There's nothing Jagmeet Singh has done recently that would lead anyone to come and vote for him. And you could say, well, you're just using your opinion because you're a conservative. I tend to be able to be fairly decently able to sympathize with the reason why left-wing voters vote the way they do. I mean, genuine people, not people in these polls. But I can generally point to sympathize with people saying that they vote a certain way and why. But there's not a lot of NDP voters that you end up seeing these days, because Jagmeet Singh has kind of gotten people to not trust him as someone who could competently run the country. So, this is why I'm a little bit skeptical when I see a polling result of 30 to 44-year-olds who are part of the Conservative Party's bread and butter. The Conservative Party does really well with people between 30 and 59. And somehow the NDP is pulling up 23% with people 30 to 44, that major tax-paying demographic. And then the NDP is also doing really well with young people. Now, I don't take issue with that one because it makes sense they're doing well with young people. I don't think that many people 18 to 29 are voting Liberal, though. So I find it a bit odd in this Abacus poll that Liberals are doing as well as the NDP with younger people, because generally speaking, it's the older people that the Liberals do disproportionately well with. So, and also there was about 9% going to the Greens of people 18 to 29. And I don't think that many young people pay enough attention to politics to really be selecting the Green Party in these polls. The Green Party is actually also a bit of a older party. That's why people like Elizabeth May are extremely popular. It's these kind of older Green activists who are what's propping up a lot of the Green Party's appeal. So when I see polls coming out like this, and I see the Conservative Party been stagnating around this low 40s, high 30s area, I think it's because we've now run into the time when people are just simply not comfortable with saying that they're voting Conservative. So we've hit the limit of how many people actually admit to it. And if there's one more thing I can quickly bring up, I think that will make my point clear. It's this Nanos research poll, because they always do issue polling, and I find some of their issue polling a little bit silly. So what you'll see here is all the different issues since 2020. I think the very start of March of 2020 or so. Sorry, I have too many overlays. I have to delete a couple first. Sorry if I'm seemingly dragging out this video, but I didn't actually upload my overlays before I hit record. So you're seeing me do this all on the fly. But this is what I mean by revealed preference versus stated preference, and why I think that the Conservatives are being held back. Just look at the way environment polls on issues in these Nanos polls. Back in early 2020, you have of environment spiked at over 20% of what people say that they care about in terms of like top issues. So you have environment basically on par with jobs and economy at the start of 2020. Because jobs and economy, or actually it's way over jobs and economy, and then jobs and economy take over because COVID's going on. I would say that's a real. That's when I say like that's a state preference, I think is pretty accurate because so many people just lost their jobs. But as you go through this, every once in a while you see the green bar that for environmental issues respike, and I don't think that that's actually proving a real preference among Canadian voters for environmental issues. How many people do you actually talk to in a given election cycle? If you ever talk to anyone about who they're voting for and how they're voting, I talk to a lot of people at the doors. During the provincial election 2023, it is a Conservative province, but Calgary was very divided. I did over 20, 25, 30 instances of door knocking during the provincial election. I did a lot of stuff behind the scenes in terms of like digital marketing. But whenever I was out the door, you'd be shocked that I'd probably only, not shocked actually, you'd expect this, I guess, but I think the average person who takes these polls seriously would be shocked that maybe two people the entire time said that environment was a top issue for them. And usually they also named two or three other things like healthcare and education. It was kind of like the gambit of NDP provincial issues. So like education, healthcare, and then they throw in the environment thing in there. People are not picking environment at anything above 1 or 2% of people who are actually showing up and voting at the polls for the environmental issues specifically. People are not showing up to the polls specifically to save the trees. It's just not happening. People mostly are always going to show up for affordability, jobs, maybe some social programs, sort of like pro-life type social issues, and then you get your hyper-progressive voters on the other side of those kind of issues. You're not having a lot of environmental issues. So when you see a lot of polls like this, you're going to get a lot of people answering surveys who are answering surveys based on what they think people taking the surveys want to hear, or what they think the overall culture thinks is the correct answer. So even though Justin Trudeau is on the outs and Jagmeet Singh is too, I don't think there's enough people who have quite broken through the idea that you're allowed to be a conservative to actually demonstrate properly what the Conservatives' real lead is right now. I don't think that when we see just a Pierre Poilievre packing in crowds in traditionally liberal ridings, and Trudeau's now having to lower the prices for his, little fundraiser dinners, that's demonstrative that the Liberals have not just lost, 6-7 points at the polls. They've lost. They've gained the apathy of so many of their own supporters. I doubt they're actually showing up to vote for them. But these people are still saying liberal on the phone because they don't want to admit that they're going to vote conservative, or they just don't care anymore, and they didn't. But for some reason, they didn't say I don't know or I'm not voting like the pollsters usually ask you. Anyways, that should be it for me today. If you want to go check out my fundraiser, I'm being sued by a billionaire. I'm winning that lawsuit. I'm $25,000 deep in it, though. So if you want to slip in some money to my Give, Send, Go fundraiser, that really helps me out. And if you also can, you can check out my website for my Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination run. If you live in Calgary Signal Hill, buy a Conservative Party membership. If you live with anyone else, get them to buy memberships too if they're 14 years old or older. Really helps me out. I want to hopefully have a real conservative representing Calgary Signal Hill. So hopefully buy membership, vote for me '1, vote for Michael Kim #2. He's actually good. The nomination's probably not happening for 5-6 months anyways, but just make sure you're all locked in right up, or locked in early so I don't have to remind you again. Anyways, that should be it for me today. Have a great day, everyone.